Hi, and welcome to another episode of Cask Candle. I'm Dr. Ian D. Brooks, and today's reflection is all around the theme of what are you going to do with the data after you get it? You see, we came from a place of where knowledge was king, where knowledge was scarce, where we were chasing the rabbit of where to find it, who has it, and who can get it quick enough, to a point in time now where data is really at our fingertips through the advent of automation, through our cell phones and other apparatus, through our emails. We get notifications sent to us ad nauseum. What it's also provided us is an opportunity to be sometimes overwhelmed by all the information that we're actually getting, to the extent that some of the information we just glance over, or better yet, we sometimes don't even look at it. So the idea that I was reminded of this past week is, with all this data that we're getting around our worlds, around our jobs, around ourselves, around what we're being marketed to, what are you going to do with this data after you get it? See, we've become data rich but insight poor. Meaning, we have all this information, but we don't know what to do with it. It's how do we think more strategically about how we leverage it and where do we apply it? This idea really came to me this past week as I was at a conference, and one of the researchers was talking about digital transformation, and as part of their dialogue and bringing up some statistics, he had mentioned that 75% of the data that they get through their particular organization doesn't get used, and that the other 25% is really focused on people's silos and very specific and niche areas of what they're looking for. So just imagine that for a moment. You've got all this data that we get, and this is just in a work context of which he was applying it, but just putting it now in a much more broader sense of what we do in our day-to-day lives, as I alluded to through our applications and our emails, etc. That just imagine that 75% of what we get, or out of 100%, only 25% gets used. So what do we do with that other 75%? And really the apparatus and really where we're going to start to see some differentiation is really around true differentiation. Is really going to come from our gleaning of insight from that data, not just taking it for sake's sake, but really being able to leverage that. That also harkens back to one of my first career choices of being a psychologist. And I remember one of my professors, as we were going through some practices of listening and the art of asking the question, he was giving me feedback one day and said, number one, never ask a question you're not prepared to hear the answer to. But also as important, are you asking a question because it's interesting? Or are you asking a question for an answer so that you can actually do something with it and move the client forward? And that's always stuck with me some 27 years later, as I now reflect upon this gentleman's 75% of unused data comment. It made me reflect upon that conversation all that time back then of now we're in the art of distilling, filtering, discerning, being strategic on how we apply the information that we have. So to get that true information, that true distilling, keep in mind several things. Number one, the data is not bad, right? Be open to all the data that you see, not just the 25% that you just want to hearken on to and feel comfortable. These themes help us evolve, both as individuals, as a society, at a business, and even what we're being marketed to, on the possibilities of something new. All transformations require that level of acknowledgement, of perspective, that we sometimes don't afford ourselves. This knowledge also creates an opportunity to see what's possible. So that 75% that we're missing might unlock so many other opportunities for us that we may not be open to if we're just stuck on that 125% to reinforce a narrative or story that fits our purpose in that moment. The second thing I'd like for you to consider as you think about what are you going to do with that data after you get it, it's apply to who you are and where you want to go. You see, oftentimes we take this data and we're looking at it and we don't know what to do with it. And sometimes it has more to do with, are we clear around the direction we want to go? You see, as organizations and leaders have, 2 to 3 year strategies that they're working to now. Sometimes it may be even shorter depending upon the life cycle and supply chain, etc. But the more clear we are around our business objectives and where we're trying to go and where we need our people to be it through skills, knowledge, and more importantly, its application on driving the business forward for an ROI, we can begin to take that data, that 75%, and really make it, instead of 25% use, we can make it actually maybe 50, or maybe turn it into that 75%. So we can then be able to drive our businesses forward and be better leaders and put our employees in better positions. That's also true of us as individuals. So we're getting all this data, we're getting all this marketing, we're getting all these pieces, and sometimes we don't know what to do with it. It's overwhelming. It's like, shit, delete. Right? I'm tired of seeing it. Tired of seeing those red flags. Oftentimes because we're getting it so much, we're just so used to just clicking on items that we don't necessarily tie it back to who we are and where we're trying to go. And that really enables us to really be able to be filtered, but also seeing what might be triggered by creating a possible on data that we may not even recognize that we might need to move us forward. So keep in mind, number one, that the data is rich and creates possibilities. It's forced to be creative and to allow us to evolve. As important to that evolution, we need to make sure that that data aligns to who we are as individuals, where we're trying to go, and if we're a business or a leader, what skills do we need to make sure our teams are developing, or I'm developing as a leader, to make sure that we have the best ROI and it aligns to our business objectives and purpose. And at that point in time, we can actually reverse those metrics and really turn that 25% into 75% usage versus only getting boxed into what we feel comfortable with doing.